Welcome everybody to our monthly One Thing webinar. Every single month we sit down and have a conversation with a best-selling author whose book is closely aligned to the one thing. And this month is certainly no exception. When our content team sits down and goes over social media, there is one book that is constantly placed right next to the one thing, and a photo is taken and published on social media. And that book is Essentialism. So many people talk about how these two books are the ones that changed their life. So we are so grateful to have Greg with us here today because he has a brand new book called Effortless out, which was on my 411 last week to read. I crushed that sucker in about 4 days, and I loved it because you all understand the importance of doing the right thing. And that's what Essentialism was about. And as you go on your journey of focusing on what matters most, while it's simple in theory, it is really, really hard. And Greg, that's why I'm just so excited for Effortless, because it's not just about doing the right thing, it's about doing it right. So thanks for being here today, my friend.
Jeff, that's so kind of you. Thank you.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So out of curiosity, for the people who are here live, if you have read Essentialism before, put number 1 in the questions box. Otherwise, give me a number 2. That'll help us just get a sense of what we are looking at. Beautiful, a lot of number 1s. Greg, for people who have not read Essentialism before, give us a high level 20%.
Essentialism is an antidote to the problem of the undisciplined pursuit of more. The antidote is the disciplined pursuit of less, but better. It's really about pursuing what's essential, eliminating what's not, and making it as easy as possible to put those essential things into practice. That is Essentialism.
When you wrote the book, did you have any idea it would become what it became?
It's just been a very humbling process to see people read it and find it to be relevant, and so I feel very grateful. You're grateful that anybody reads anything that you write. But what has surprised me about Essentialism, the biggest compliment really, has been how many people have said that they have reread it or reread it every year, or as an agent in Hollywood told me, I'm on my 17th time of listening to it, which I don't know what to make of all of that, but it just makes me think, not, I wrote a great book, but it makes me think, it's a great issue. It's a great need in the world. And people really feel the strain of just endlessly doing more and more, but not necessarily being more satisfied or feeling like they're getting to the next level in life.
Yeah. I want to dive into what your life looked like after the book hit all the bestseller lists. How did your life begin to change? And what was that moment that ultimately took you on a path that led to Effortless?
Everything changed with Essentialism. I remember going to a book signing, and there's a line out the door, 300 people long. They ran out of books. They'd never run out of books before. I'm traveling all over the world. I'm still being highly selective in what I'm doing, far more selective than I'd been previously. But in addition to all these things that I highly motivated to do, I'm also by this point the father of 4 children, and so there's all those responsibilities. There's editors and agents ready for the next thing, give us the next book. There's it's just a proliferation of just the pattern that I've identified in Essentialism, the success paradox. And I was already feeling the strain of that, even though I wasn't writing another book, even though I had put on hiatus the class that I co-designed at Stanford, wasn't creating a training company as I had, you're supposed to do. And so all these things, but still I felt, wow, there's still a lot. And it made me think of the metaphor that we've all heard, the big rocks theory, where the way it's supposed to work is that if you get the order of the rocks right, it fits. So if you get it wrong, the problem is you put the small sand in, then the small rocks, then the big rocks, and it just doesn't fit. Just geometrically, it doesn't work. But if you put the big rocks in, then the small rocks, then the sand, then it's all going to fit. And this is a metaphor for the most important things are the big rocks and so on. But I found myself saying, but what happens if you just have too many big rocks? So actually you have eliminated the sand, you've eliminated many of the small rocks, but you're still too many things. What do you do then? Do you just say, okay, well, I'm just not going to invest in your health. I'm not going to invest in my marriage, or that can wait. We've got the children now. Oh, no, we're not going to worry about one of the children. They seem to be fine. We just won't worry about them. Which thing do you put down? What do you not do when they're all essential? And in the midst of that challenge, frustration, I then I'm traveling and I get a call from my son, quite a panicked call that he's videoing me from my wife's phone. That got my attention too. That was unusual. And as it turns out, one of my daughters was having a massive tonic-clonic seizure. And that was really just one of the key moments in the discombobulation of her health. She'd gone from the picture of health full of light and energy and animation and funny and physically active and on a rock climbing team and just thriving to suddenly, inexplicably, just losing her capability to just free fall. And we could talk more about that, but that pushed it over even further. And so it became clear to me that just even personally, I had to find more than just, figure out what's essential, eliminate non-essential. You still have to find the right way to do what's essential. So doing the right thing is one thing. Doing it in the right way is just as important. Because if you do it in the wrong way, you're still going to burn out before those most important, most essential activities, relationships, goals are achieved. And if you burn out before you get there, it doesn't matter how important it is, you're still not going to get it done. And indeed, the plot thickens because as I have now worked with people all over the world on trying to execute what's essential, I found that not only is it a bad idea that if you burn out before you get there, it's in fact the predominant path people take. So because they really have been taught and believe as an absolute truism, an almost natural law, that the more important a thing is, the harder it will be. And so that's just a dominant mindset. And I am telling you, it's everywhere. And it's stated so boldly, just like the saying, the truth. You notice it. As soon as you start getting to Effortless, you will notice the next time a leader tries to inspire the troops, this thing is so important, it's going to be so hard. But man, it really matters. They just make that speech all day long. No one will ever question it. No one will ever say, well, does it have to be? And the cost of that mindset is enormous because it means that people either get going on their path to what's essential and give up because they burn out, or they don't even get going on it in the first place because they just say, well, it's just overwhelming just to even think about it. So they don't even start the journey. And this is just all unnecessary. So Effortless is my attempt at trying to articulate what I learned personally to get through this particularly acute challenge with our daughter's health and everything else that is so important to us. But it's also a codification of these ideas so that other people can find a way to achieve the things that matter most, but without burning out. That's the idea.
I want to drive a few points home because it matters. Most people start before they're introduced to these ideas, putting the sand in first, then the pebbles, and then they hope to earn the right to get to the big rocks. And there's never enough.
Right.
Then they start to go down the path. They start to implement. They start to identify what is a big rock, a 20% priority that drives 80% of my results versus everything else. And they start to do those. They experience success. They get results. Their life gets bigger. And all of a sudden, the number of big rocks increases. and you wake up to the point where you hit a ceiling of achievement because there's no more space. There's too many big rocks. And then you really have a problem. But the thing that you were talking about is it's not just, okay, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing it the right way? I personally, when you were talking about this in the book, reflected on times when I've been leading trainings inside of companies and talking about how doing the one thing is not always the easiest thing. I'm going to stop that immediately.
Yeah.
Because why impose that on people versus asking a powerful question that you put in the book? How might this be easy? How might I make this easier? So I want to go ahead.
You said it at the beginning of this conversation. I mean, I love that I don't mean to call you out now. You just called yourself out. I'm not trying to, but you said it right at the beginning. It's like essentialism, it's important, but it's so tough. You said something like that at the very beginning of this conversation. And it's just like, I did it too. Somebody said to me, they read essentialism. They said, oh man, I love essentialism, but it should come with a warning. This will be the hardest thing that you will ever do. And I just parroted that. I'm like, oh, that's a good line. I'm going to teach that. I taught people that essential things are hard, among the hardest things you will ever do. Really? Now, sometimes that's true. I'm not saying it's never true, but does it really have to be that there's only two songs? You can either sing the hard and essential song or the easy and trivial song. Is it possible there's a third alternative? Could we even consider that? Could we open ourselves up to that possibility? That we could make the essential things the easiest things in our lives? Well, what would happen if you could? That would change everything. It does change everything.
So much of the things that we have witnessed shepherding people on a journey of living the one thing, it's the skill of asking bigger questions and searching for bigger answers. And bigger questions, you often hit a wall called, I don't know. What's the one thing you can do? Such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary. I don't know. So they go check email. And they look at something that's a big rock that they perceive to be hard. And if you ask the question, how might I make this easier? My friend John Berghoff said to me once, and this has really changed the way I view the power of questions. He said, the moment you ask a question, you can change somebody's future. Because it's literally like putting a new lens over their vision, putting on a new pair of glasses. The moment we ask a question, you channel their focus. And if you train your brain to actually search for the answer, it can arrive at one, but you got to give yourself the permission to search. So I'm curious for you. You go from having a phenomenally successful book. You're traveling around the world, speaking, working with people. The business is booming. More requests are coming in for your time. You're saying no to more and more and more things. The big rocks are piling up, and you get the call.
Mm-hmm.
Your daughter's in the hospital, and you have to clear the decks. How did you go about identifying what the easy path was? How it could even become effortless?
Well, I just had a sort of almost, I don't want to use the wrong word here, but I wanted to say vision, but I mean just a glimpse that there were two paths. That previously may not have been very obvious to me. I mean, you just assume that something this essential, right? It's obvious that it's essential. Nobody has to point that out. It's obvious that you would be willing to rearrange any schedule, any other commitments to try and address this. But if you have a mindset of like the hardest things, the essential things, the more essential, the harder it is, then you go into it with an idea that, well, this is so important, it has to require superhuman effort. We have to do everything we possibly can. It's so important, you'd be justified, as you sometimes see in these movies, just don't sleep. You're just going to read all night every possible thing to be able to find some solution, some cure. And there's a sort of heroism that a moment like this can sometimes call forth from you. And if you're not careful, see, you would burn out in so many important ways fast. And one of the first things you're going to burn out is your ability to see clearly. I mean, you use the metaphor of putting on glasses, asking questions like putting on glasses. And I like actually thinking about that in almost the opposite way. It's like we have We have these goggles on that make it hard to see what to do next. And it's so cluttered. And our job is to take them off so that this effortless state, that's the language I now use for it, the effortless state can exist. Effortless state is where you're physically rested, emotionally at peace and centered, so that you can see what's important now, that you can be fully present in doing it. So what are some of the things that are on those kind of the funny goggles, right? I mean, if you're exhausted, you can't see clearly. If you're sleep deprived, then you'll have foggy brain. And then we'll think of how that would get in the way of being able to actually succeed at this most essential work of helping Eve get better. If you're just foggy brained all the time, think of how cluttered your decision making will be. Now that's just physical clutter, but there's other forms of distortion in these goggles. There is emotional clutter and complexity. Like think of all the why us? Why is this happening to us? Why is it happening to Eve? This is so unfair. You could imagine all the worst case scenario. Well, what if we never find anything to her? She's on her way to falling into a coma and dying. That is a fact. And it is also a fact that a neurologist could give us even the beginning of a diagnosis. Every test came back in the normal range, even while her capability is day by day reducing. There's a temptation to take a situation that's already hard and making it much, much harder by having emotional clutter get in the way. And then there's just mental clutter where you just start to read every option that everybody sends you. Everyone's well-intended sending you these basically terminal illnesses that Eve might have, and they're all different kinds, and these aren't coming from doctors or people that are well-informed. They're just trying to help, but you could spend all night long reading all of that stuff, and you get mentally cluttered and so on. And so that's the state of suffering. That cluttered state is a state of suffering. And this other path that mercifully we became aware of and took is just the path of really removing all of that. But we're still going to sleep. We've got to rest. Why do you have to rest? Because we don't know how long this will take. And we have to be in the best state that we can possibly be in. We need to be at, let's call it an elite level state, so that we can be present, make good decisions, figure out what actually the right path is going forward. We need to, so how do we do that? What does the lighter path look like? I mean, yes, get the rest. Make sure you're still getting that. It meant there were just some questions we just would not do. We're not going to ask why us or why Eve, or we're not doing that. We don't have time for that. We're not going to complain. We're going to be grateful. We're going to be thankful for every possible small thing we possibly can, and we're going to encourage everyone in the family to do it. We're going to still laugh together. We're going to still maintain the culture. We're still going to sing together and get around the piano and sing, and we're going to still play games, and we're still going to, so that we can maintain the state necessary to be able to know what action to take and what things not to do.
I want to dive.
So we can get the results we want. Go ahead.
How many of you who are here right now know what it feels like to have so much on your plate that it's almost crippling? If so, put me in the chat box. And how many of you know what it feels like to go through your days feeling like you're carrying or dragging this emotional anvil behind you? That was me earlier this week, by the way. And all you're suggesting, Greg, is that there's an alternative, and it's pursuing an effortless state, a state where you can have clarity, a state where you can actually manage your emotions and set the ones that are not going to serve you to the side. And there's something you touched on in the book that I think is really important, and you're hitting it at a high level here, but I want to dive. It's the idea of rest. I'm curious for how many people here, if we had you show your calendar right now, we would literally see it's like a game of Tetris, just fitting all the blocks together, back to back to back to back to back. So give me a number one in the questions box. Yeah. Greg, when you were talking about this, it hit me. That was my May. There were more big rocks than there was time. And I knew I was going to have to go out of balance for the month and that it would alleviate. But I was consciously aware of the toll it was taking on me. And you had some very tactical recommendations for how we can structure our day so that we just get that little bit of rest. Because at a high level, here's why this matters. If you work too long, too hard, not only do you get diminishing returns, it can get to a point where it actually becomes detrimental and it undermines the very success you're working so hard for. So talk to us about some of the tactical things we can do to have more rest throughout our day.
Well, I mean, one of the first things I have to say about this is that for many overachievers, you know, especially if you're part of the hit squad, as my brother Justin calls it, hit squad has, you know, the hardworking, intelligent, talented group of people, HIT, the hit squad. It's the chances are you actually don't know how to relax. You actually don't have that capability. So it's like you know how to work hard, and that's one of the reasons you keep doing it and keep trying to answer the problem by doing more of that. This is a familiar capability, and I'm not saying it's a bad capability. It's useful in its place. It's just limited. And so if you just try to say, well, if I want to achieve 10x results, I have to work 10 times as hard. That isn't what you're going to get. That's not how it's going to work out for you. So you have to develop. First, you have to say, well, relaxing is a responsibility. Relaxing is a capability, and I've got to learn how to do it. And so you might be at level 0 on learning how to do this right now, and you might have to develop it bit by bit. One of the specific things that I recommend people do is write down a list of the things that you can, you know, like it's called like building blocks of relaxation. You say, what things actually relax me? What things are recuperating for me? And my wife did this, Anna did this, and I did it, and our lists are very different. And that's part of the exercise. You have to pay attention. At first you think, I don't know what to do. But then if you start to think about, well, the things I actually enjoy, and you make a list, and we did it, we each did, I think, 20 things on the list. And then recently Anna brought her list to me again, and they'd become much more precise. She was down to about 10, and some of them were very specific and unique to her, like signature relaxing rituals. And so now these can be built and designed into the day instead of that uncomfortable feeling that a lot of overachievers have when they say, okay, I'm done for the day. And then they're like, well, that feels really awkward. That's awful. I don't actually enjoy it. They don't want to go on a vacation and sit somewhere on a beach because they feel like they're missing out. They feel like I need to be doing more, the workaholism, so on. And instead of that, you can start designing experiences that are ritualistic and specific for you and that you do genuinely look forward to. And so that can make it a little tricky to just tell other people what they should be. It should be designed for them and shared with your significant other, because then they can help design experiences for you. And suddenly you have somebody.
But you just gave them a gift. You gave them a question that they can search for the answer to, which this might be the lead domino for you following this interview, which is, what actually relaxes me? What are the things that relax me? And you could literally take a pen and a piece of paper and 2 minutes and brainstorm ideas and ask the question, okay, based on these, what's one that I want to weave into my schedule? You know, Greg, you shared something in the book, the idea of when you look at your time blocks, the idea of having 3 90-minute time blocks with just a tiny window in between, 10, 15 minutes. And when you said it, I was immediately teleported back through my calendar. And I could actually visualize the days when I was back to back to back and how taxing that was for me emotionally versus the moments when I literally had 15 minutes or less and I could just do a quick walk around the block, and how getting in the sunshine for me and walking our neighborhood, because it's beautiful, how much that like completely rejuvenates me, and I come right back in and I am ready to go. It's like I just had my cup of coffee. I don't even need it. I just roll this way.
Anders Ericsson was curious about whether the sleep patterns that we have at night that are well established, 90-minute approximately sleep cycles, and all of us need 3 of these per night. So they're not happening 10 times a night, but it's 3 times. And some people's are shorter than others, so they need less, minutes in bed. But you all need 3 cycles, and if you have one of them interrupted, then you're not going to feel like you've had a good night's sleep. So that's well established. But he just posed the question to his research team. He said, well, what if those continue through the day? Do they continue through the day? Or is it just a sleep phenomenon? Is it a human phenomenon or a sleep phenomenon? And they found that they do continue through the day. And so you have 3 cycles in the morning that are your optimal cycles, which has a couple of implications for designing a life where getting the essentials done becomes more effortless. This is what you're doing. You're saying 90 minutes protected to do something that's essential, something that really matters, to push the needle forward, and you're protecting that time. You take the break and you do it again for another 90 minutes, and then a break and another 90 minutes. This is your morning effectively, and it's making sure that you're prioritizing what you do in that time, protecting it, but also creating the break in between, a moment. I go sometimes play tennis with my son, and sometimes we'll play a whole set, but sometimes I'll say, hey, listen, I've got 15 minutes. We can play. We can relax together. We can do something. And it's surprising to me how rejuvenative those small segments are. You'd think you'd need maybe more, but it just does me a lot of good to get outside and spend a few minutes, doing something that's disconnected to the work instead of just this perpetual flow of work we try to do.
So I want to dive in here. You're noticing a theme. You say something smart, I dive in. You said 3 90-minute time blocks that you protect with space in between to rejuvenate yourself. And I know for a fact that all the people here, the vast majority of them, thought to themselves, whether consciously or subconsciously, that sounds nice, and I don't know how I can do that, or I can't do that, or that won't work inside my company. So walk us through the effortless mindset to actually go on a journey to making this their reality.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very sympathetic to that problem. My general view on executing on what's essential is that if you don't have a point of view on what is essential, then you will just be a function of what other people are defining for you, right? If you don't prioritize your life, someone else definitely will. And so I think you have to have a point of view about what is important each day, what is essential. So let's say this is a pattern that I used for years, and then I haven't been doing it at all recently, and it's made my days feel much more frenetic and frantic. But I for many years just said, okay, I have 6 things. What are the 6 things you need to do today? Approximately 3 things personal and family, and 3 things business. And it doesn't mean you are limited, you can't do anything that's off that list, but by taking a moment, and I actually think it takes more than, it's not a 10-second thing. You have to, when I do it, it doesn't take a long time, but it takes me a while to really just think and pause. What is going to be satisfying by the end of the day if I get these things done? So you have to have a point of view about those things. I think you also have to have a point of view about how to use your time. And so you want to be able to at least put it on your calendar. Maybe you put it on repeat so that you at least have a placeholder for it there, even if that suddenly is noticeably competing with other things that other meetings that are already scheduled. That's just phase 1. It's like you have a point of view. Now you need to go and advocate for that point of view. And you've got to learn how to do that in a skilled way. So it's not enough. You can't just dictate it. If you're in a workplace, most people are, and they're in some hierarchical structure. You can't just go to your boss or your boss's boss or even your own team, your peer group. Oh no, this is what I'm doing. Too bad. No, of course not. But but you will, if you don't have a point of view, you will just become a function of them. And they may be very reactive in what they're doing. So you go and have a conversation. You have the courage to have the conversation. And in Essentialism, there's a whole section on negotiating. Those, what really matters. But then I think the third thing you need to have skill in is to be able to make it safe for other people to have the conversation with you.
Mm-hmm.
So that where you have influence, and all of us have influence. If we have direct reports, reporting to us, we have direct influence with them. But even with the other people around us, there are times when we are the person that could be getting in the way of somebody else's prioritization with our request. And so making it safe for other people. For a lot of people, the most dangerous thing they do is talk, and speak up. And they don't want to do it because it can be so dangerous for them in a variety of ways. So we have the obligation to make it safe. For people who want to listen to a really interesting conversation about this and how to do it, it's a free resource. It's on my podcast, the What's Essential podcast, and it's with Banks Benitez, and it's about how they applied essentialism inside of a corporate environment with the matrixed organizations and all of these internal, external customers, and what did they do? And they hypothesized. They said, if we learn how to apply essentialism in our world, it should be true that we can achieve 40 hours worth of outcome in 32 hours worth of work, or in other words, a 4-day work week. And so they got external people to come and actually measure their output. They had an experiment for 6 weeks trying to apply the ideas, got another test, same external group came and tested them, spent another 6 weeks applying what they'd learned from that mid-test and feedback. And at the end of their 3-month experiment, they concluded, we actually, this is for real. And they've moved now, official policy for their whole company, to a 4-day work week. Here's the key part of the whole thing and why I'm sharing it at this juncture, is that the price they paid for this, the thing they needed to change, was to have the conversation around prioritization.
Mm-hmm.
And that's news, because what that means is that before, the prioritization conversation was missing. And that's what I have found in the years since writing Essentialism, is that in corporations, in day-to-day work, people are not talking about what is the priority today. So it's not that people don't conceptually understand what prioritization is, it's that they do not have the conversation, either because of cultural norm or because of a lack of skill or both. It's just missing. So every so often you do some offsite, maybe, okay, well, here are sort of 5, 6, 7 things we're going to try and focus on, and these are big initiatives. And then day to day, it's just like a free-for-all. It's just this, people living in their inbox, and it's just messy, and you just keep requesting and keep pushing, and I'll just keep nudging you, and you keep nudging me. We got no idea what's actually essential. So what they did in their company is that they had to have those conversations, because that's the only way you could get more done in less time. And so they would go to each other, and they would say, even the CEO would say, okay, here's what I think is really important. I'd like you to do this today. And someone would say, he would say, but what are you working on? What's the priority for you today? What? And they would say, well, this is what is the priority for me. See, they've done the internal work. They come to it with an answer. And sometimes, he said 40% of the time they concluded that what the CEO said actually was more important, and that's what they did. But 60% of the time they say, actually, what you're doing is more important than what I thought, so you just carry on with what you're doing. And that give and take, that is key. Go ahead.
I want to give some language to this, because people will go, okay, I want to have the conversation, but how do I? I just interviewed one of our clients after completing a year's worth of working together, and we're looking at the next 3 years. And when I asked what were the successes we had, the CEO said to me, the number one success that I think we accomplished in the last year was that the chairman of the board no longer assumes that people are just available when his staff calls. Now when staff calls, they ask, are you in a time block? And acknowledge that just because the chairman has a priority in the moment doesn't mean that it actually is the most important priority. And for very common language for you, I love how you said it starts by you giving the permission. If you are a leader of people, I promise you, you are the one of the biggest problems. And I say that with love and grace. And here's a solution. I say this with my team. When I ask them to do something, I say, or I ask, help me understand what I might be asking you to say no to so that you can say yes to this. And
That's a
that
great
works
question.
laterally and it works up the chain because it
Say
acknowledges
it
that.
again so people can hear that.
Greg, I need you to pull this report for me today. What I'm not clear on is what I might be asking you to say no to so you can say yes to this. Help me understand so I make sure you're acting in order of priority.
Yeah. What am I asking you to say no to in order to say yes to this? It's really good because we live in the norm is to believe that there's no trade-offs. It's like each request is evaluated only against itself. So the problem with that is that you're really saying, well, if this is a good thing, then you sign up for it. It's a good thing. But because we don't live in a trade-off free world, we live in exactly the opposite, where everything is a trade-off. Absolutely every yes is a no. And actually every yes is a no to many things. So go ahead.
It's many no's.
Yeah, exactly. And so once you say it, then you get to have then it's an honest conversation. What are we saying no to in order to say yes to this? And often you find, oh no, that if you're saying no to that, I actually would much prefer you go right back to what you were doing. That's more important than my shiny new object in this moment. Oh, I have something about this. Okay, this is Eve, the one that I was talking about before. This was before she got sick, but she was. I was trying to persuade her to read this particular book in this day, and like just like, hey, listen, just do this. And it's like I like the manager, shiny new object. So she's pushing back, but not rudely. And then I come back to the office, and she slips a note under my door that and I was sharing this. Somebody laminated it so I'd never lose this. This is the actual note, though. It says. She wrote, I already expressed my unwillingness to read this book, but I'm willing to make a counteroffer. I am not willing to read it all in one day today, but I'd be happy to explore the possibility of reading it in the future over the course of a few weeks. I believe it would be best to wait till the end of my literature assignment. If you would like me to read this book in place of a separate assignment and over the course of a few weeks, I'm sure that can be made possible.
Dude, I feel like you just described my daughter in 10 years. I'm so in trouble.
Well, I loved it because to me it shows this this idea that you need to be able to it's not the polite yes and the rude no, it's the polite no, it's the negotiated yes, and in fact I heard it said this way recently. It's like in life you can either be and I hope it's not too provocative to say it this way, like you can either be a slave to someone or you can be like the tyrant, or you can negotiate. And in a sense, those are always your three options. Which means that for healthy relationships, you must be in the mode of negotiation. That is the healthy give and take that's needed for relationships to exist in a healthy way long term. She was stepping into that. I was unintentionally stepping into, look, just do this. This is the answer for you. Forgetting that she has a whole, set of commitments already, and she showed that how you can advocate for yourself. If I was doing it better, I would have been able to advocate for her. But here's this book. But what are you saying no to if you do this?
Yeah. I made a commitment to you that I would manage the clock. So we have T minus 5 minutes. So we need to land this plane. I want to, for people who want to begin the journey of pursuing the effortless path, what's the one thing they can do to start?
Yeah, what's the one thing someone can do to make everything effortless? It sounds like I've heard that before. Actually, I
By the
was
way,
thinking about this. I think there's an easier way to ask that question. I've been thinking about this myself. That
let's
that
go.
really, what's the whole question? Give me context. What's the question as is worded in the one thing?
What's the one thing you can do such that by doing it, everything else would be easier or unnecessary?
Right. It's a great question, but it's also quite a lot of words.
It is a lot of
So
words.
I was thinking recently. I hope that sounds so very presumptuous to say this, but I was like, what's the easiest way to say that? And I was thinking, well, you could just say, well, what's the one thing that makes everything effortless? Or everything else effortless? Couldn't you say it like that?
I mean, we could really get into it. There's a lot behind it because it's one thing, not two things, and it's one thing you can do. Because a lot of people will come up with a list of things that they should do or feel like they ought to be able to do, but it's not a too much
Yeah,
domino they can't.
I like that.
Such
What is
that
the
by,
one thing you
such that by
can do?
doing it, meaning I walk the talk, I don't just because the dominoes are lined up. Everything else is easier or unnecessary because it's not always going to be effortless.
Easier or unnecessary?
Yeah.
So you could say, what's the one thing you can do that makes everything easier?
But there are some
Or
things you can do.
unnecessary? All right.
Now,
I know
you and
you've
I,
thought about this
you
so
and
much
I,
more
oh yeah.
than me. No, I'm not knocking it at all. You've taught it, you've broken it down, you've thought about every word in that phrase. How many times have you asked that question in your life? I mean, you're thousands in. Okay, the one thing that somebody can do to get on the journey of effortless. All right, I've got it. I would just, and it is similar to what we're on right now. It sounds so simple, it could be ignored because we've often been taught to distrust the easy and simple. But really, it's to invert, always invert. And I'll give you a question that goes with this, and that is, all right. Now I've got it. I'm going to share one small story and one question to go with it. So it's not in Effortless. It got edited out of Effortless. I was the one that edited it out, and I kind of regret that. But it's a story that I came across in the research of a woman who is with her dying son at the end of his life, and she's in the hospital with him, and she gets up into the bed with him just to be close to him. And then right at that end point, when he's still in the here, but he's not fully here and he's not fully there yet. He's in the in-between. He suddenly just opens his eyes and he says, "Oh, Mom, it's all so simple. It's all so simple." And those are his last words. After that, he dies. And that becomes this soundtrack, this mantra for the rest of her life and for us if we're willing to learn it. It's all so simple. And the question that goes with it is just to ask, how am I making what's essential harder than it needs to be?
Mm.
And that to me is like, just start there, because you will find things, you will find ways you're adding all sorts of unnecessary complexity. You're bringing all sorts of unnecessary emotion to something, and then you'll have what's very powerful, because you'll know what to do next. And what we do next matters most.
I thought you were going to go that direction. I thought you were going to ask the question. I'm flipping what you said, but how can I make it easier to do what matters most? Bottom line is asking, your answer is you ask a question. You ask a question that takes you down a path to explore the easier path. Greg, where can people learn more about you, get your book?
Yeah, look, Effortless is everywhere that there are books. I think there's still a deal where if you order Effortless, you can also get the 21-day Essentialism Challenge for free. I think the publisher still has that, but people can check that out at essentialism.com. We're just building a new academy, and I think those are the places. Maybe You can listen to the audiobook if you'd like this conversation. The audiobook seems to be resonating for people, and those are plenty.
You
That's
do have
plenty
a
for people to be
silky
going on.
voice, my friend.
Say that again.
You do have a silky voice. It does
A
work
silky
out.
voice. Well, for good oil, I read it. I don't know that that was a good thing, but I read it and I was happy to do it.
There you go, my friend. Well, I promised you we'd be done by this time. So thank you so much for investing the time with us. And for everybody, make sure to pick up a copy of Effortless anywhere books are sold. I chose to listen to it and absolutely loved it. So Greg, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everyone.
All right, folks, there you have it, our conversation